Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for tuning in today. My name is James Bauman. I'm the Director of Communications and Publications for ACUOI, and I'm serving as tech support for today's virtual roundtable, a space for small college and university staff. We're very glad to have you all here. We think we're going to have a lot of good discussion today. So as we dig into this, we're going to start off with just a little housekeeping. First of all, just want to let you know that these virtual roundtable sessions have been very well received. We're glad that people are responding to them. There's been obviously an awful lot going on, and ACUOI is doing our best to generate as many resources for you as possible and making them available 24/7. We'd like to point out our online community has been hustling with activity as people have been posting and, more importantly, answering questions, so that's fantastic. All of our virtual roundtables, such as this ones, are being recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. And then, of course, and particularly in the areas of the COVID-19 and the pandemic, we've been generating resources and cultivating them and curating them on our website. And so those are always available for you as well. In a little bit, we're going to get started with our panel today. Couple quick notes. First of all, this is not going to be, your traditional webinar where our panelists are just going to lecture at you. We want this to be a conversation, very much a two-way street. So throughout this entire presentation, we are encouraging all of our participants to post questions, share their experiences, etc. We want this to be a dialogue. So just to make sure that everybody's looking in okay, if you could find the button to raise your hand on the screen and give us a sign. All right, it's always very reassuring when you see all those little hands popping up on the screen. So that's great. So, all right, so that's working. Again, keep your eyes open for the Q&A panel, and just go ahead and, as the conversation is going on, post those questions as you have them. A few upcoming events. We're going to be doing just a constant series of our virtual roundtables. On Thursday, we will be doing a special one focusing on housing and student safety as people return to campus. Everybody's invited to participate in that. And then, of course, I would also like to point out that as we are into October, that marks the beginning of our conference series. So academic initiatives, business operations, and housing facilities are all focus topics that we'll be addressing during these sessions. One of the things that's new as we've gone virtual is that we are offering team registrations, and these have been incredibly well received, and we thank everybody who has signed up for these. But what this means is that when you register your institution, you have an unlimited number of individuals from your campus that can attend these. So what this has meant, we've had campuses where literally dozens of staff members are being registered as attendees for these. It's a great chance to have sort of crossing from one team to another. So perhaps you've always had an interest in one area. This is a good chance for you to maybe break out of some of those silos and learn a little bit more about what's happening in other areas. And again, all the registration, programming information, et cetera, as always, is available on our website at acuo-i.org. So with all of that said, very quickly, I will now turn things over to Drew Peterson. He is the Associate Dean of Students and the Director of Residence Life at Presbyterian College. He's going to serve as our facilitator today. He also serves in an ex officio role on our executive board with a special focus on small colleges, and has helped lead conversations around small colleges at the board level, working with staff, and now obviously in these experiences such as this where we're bringing everybody in. So I will turn things over to him and let him lead the conversation. Take it away, Drew, and thank you to everybody for joining in today.
Thank you, James. It's great to see everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. As James said, my name is Drew Peterson. I'm the Associate Dean of Students and Director of Residence Life at Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina. I've been here about 6.5 years. And as James also mentioned, I serve as the director for small colleges and universities on the Akuhoai Executive Board. So, through many conversations with lots of folks, some of whom I see in the attendee list here, we have heard the need for more conversations amongst our small school folks. And I'm excited to host this one for you and look forward to plenty more in the future. Before I have our panelists introduce themselves, I do just want to give them one great big thank you for being with us today. All of us are incredibly busy, and I'm happy you're here listening and asking questions, and I'm very appreciative of them for sharing our time. I know when we get to the end of Zoom calls, sometimes, when you click end on Zoom, everybody disappears quickly. So I wanted to make sure to share that appreciation with each of them for being with us today. And all of that being said, before we jump into questions, if we can start with introductions, Brittany, you lead off.
Hello, everyone. I'm extremely glad to be here with you today. My name is Brittany Greer, and I am the Assistant Director for Residence Education here at USC Upstate. I have been in this role since January, so I'm fairly new at this institution. I've been in higher education for about 5 years now. So that's just a little bit about me. But again, I'm glad to be with you today, and hopefully I'll be able to serve you the best way I can.
Aaron, you want to jump in next?
Hey, y'all. Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Roberts. I'm with Spalding University in Louisville, Kentucky. And I've been in that role for 4 years. And when we think about occupancy right now, for us, like a lot of you all, we're doing single rooms for our students. We've amended our guest policy and programming, and I'm happy to talk about more of that with you all today as we navigate through COVID, but also step into addressing our needs during this time that we are in as a society.
Good morning, or morning for us here on the West Coast. Good afternoon for everybody else. My name is Isaiah Thomas. I oversee housing and student conduct here at Occidental College, which is located in Los Angeles, the Liberal Arts College of Los Angeles. We have about 1,650 is our total number of beds that we normally have. Living in Los Angeles during the pandemic has been particularly interesting. Pretty much every school and university in LA County is under LA County guidance. And at the end of July, they had basically shared that no colleges or universities can host students on campus with exception to housing hardships, which they allowed colleges and universities to define on their own. So myself, as well as many of our schools out this way, are not filled at all. We have, of our 1,650 beds, we have about 110 students who've been living with us since August. No outbreaks, no COVID cases. So, I think we represent the most extreme or the most conservative approach to this. And we're going to be waiting to continue to hear updated guidance from LA County in regards to spring. One of our challenges is that they had shared that they won't be releasing their guidance until the pretty much the end of November, beginning of December. I believe they're going to look at what infection rates are after the Thanksgiving holiday in order to dictate and make a decision. So that's extraordinarily challenging for a lot of us schools out here to be able to, decipher what decisions we can make, what decisions we can't make, given that we're not going to have an answer until, a week or two before the end of fall semester. So that's kind of where we are at right now, but I'm looking forward to the conversation with you all.
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Everson, Executive Director of Housing and Residential Education at Purdue University Northwest. Been here for 8 years. We have 744 beds. We've taken off 2 wings, basically, 20 full apartments, which equates to between 70 to 80 students offline. It wouldn't have mattered anyway because we're only 60% full. We live in Indiana, and we live right, like we're Hammond, Indiana. So we're like right outside of Chicago. In Chicago, there's all sorts of restrictions for things, and then in Indiana, there's not. Like we're, as the governor would say, completely open. So we have been recently working with our students on this idea of, how open can we be, and they want us to, be completely open. So we are sort of on the opposite. I say that to illuminate our differences with Isaiah, who obviously has lots of restrictions on government, and our situation is the opposite. Our restrictions come from university restrictions that we place to try and bring it back in to what makes, to us as much common sense as we possibly can in a state that's wide open. So, but yeah, so yeah, 60% occupancy. I think I said that. So that's where we are.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And don't forget, those of you who are participants, please ask questions. We are happy to take those as they come in so we can get you information you are most interested in. But I think Isaiah and Scott took us down a good path to start, which is just talking about what the fall semester looks like. So Aaron and then Brittany, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what life on campus looks like for you right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So here at USC Upstate, we are about 50% occupancy on our campus. We have about 6,000 students on campus. That's our enrollment number. And currently it has been very, very different for us because even though we are at half capacity or occupancy, we are still finding that because we are a smaller institution and we only have about 6 full-time staff members in our office, that the load can be a lot in addition to our daily responsibilities that we had prior to COVID-19. So navigating through that and trying to figure out how to do that efficiently so that we are not burnt out and things like that is kind of what we're working through and how our fall semester looks. With dining, we have a lot of help from our dining services here on campus. And they're doing a lot to make sure that we get our meals on time and that we get those delivered out. But because we are a small institution, our department is having to do a lot of the manual labor in that. So we are navigating through how to do that, but also to still keep our staff healthy and to still make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well.
Yeah, in a similar vein, we have 340 beds for 800 students, and we are at half occupancy for that. So about 46% of our beds are filled in a single occupancy housing, and we've reserved 5% of our beds for each hall of our 2 halls, which is more than enough for isolation or quarantine rooms. And we've also maintained a conservative guest policy where right now we're not allowing outside guests of that building to enter that building. But if you are person A down the room can visit person B down the other hallway, they still have to maintain our COVID guidelines while doing that. It's also been a time a time of unrest, especially with racial justice. Being in Louisville, where Breonna Taylor was killed, we are a institution in downtown Louisville. So we are near where those events are going on. We're also founded by the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, which is through the Catholic Church, and so which has a heart for social justice. So it's been an interesting juxtaposition or crossroads of who we are as an institution. And I think our students and faculty and staff have stepped up well to fulfill our mission, which is to meet the needs of the times. And I think a way we've done that too is also making sure we document what we do. I see Paul Yar, Dr. Yar is on this call. I want to give a shout out to him. He was a consultant for us, and he helped us formalize our strategic plan, particularly our standard operating procedure. And that's having an SOP has been a game changer for us to not only adapt, but also execute fast and execute well on the situations we need to do. Fortunately, we have fewer than 5% of our fewer than 5 in total of our residential students test positive for COVID, but we're wearing a lot of hats like many of you all are.
And that's one thing, as we talk about all of the different hats that each of us are wearing and the new roles that so many of us find ourselves in and taking on. And in particular, our other staff members are taking on, and some of even colleagues from other departments are helping us with. I'm going to drop a link in the chat for the Akuho'ai Heroes Forum that they have put out just a couple weeks ago, just to be able to help us as an association recognize some of those folks who are really going above and beyond. You know, all other duties as assigned is a standard part of our job descriptions, but certainly we find ourselves in unique circumstances right now, and the opportunity to recognize some of those people on our staffs who are really going above and beyond in special ways is something that we as an organization want to do. So I will drop that link for the form in the chat if you all want to take a look at it later and maybe nominate some folks. It would be great to be able to celebrate some of the work that they are doing more collectively. And so I think, you know, one of the nice things about being in this space and being able to talk about small schools and the work that we're doing, I'm just kind of curious from the panelists' perspectives, you know, what do you think might be the advantages of being at a small school right now when it comes to all of the different things that we're dealing with? Certainly we've talked about the challenges and we know what they are, but what advantages might we have over some of our larger peers?
You know, I'll go first if that's okay with my fellow panelists. You know, we are part of the Purdue system, so I get to see a lot of what West Lafayette is going through. And if you have not been following, I guess we probably all have higher ed news. Purdue, West Lafayette has been out front with a lot of things. You've seen our president, Mitch Daniels, out there kind of talking about, you know, what Purdue is doing, you know, and they are going through extensive testing and contact tracing and spending all enormous amounts of money to do it. I think one of the advantages as I look at that and compare ourselves to that is that's a really unwieldy process. It's something that they've had to go through and plan and you know, get into place. I find that one of the things it's been relieving has been my ability to sit down. I just had a committee meeting this morning. We call ourselves the Positive Test Results Committee, and we sit down, and it's a cross section of the entire university that I have access to be able to talk about what it's looking like on the entire campus. So I get a nice global picture of everything. And I feel like my world isn't quite so tight into housing, and that's actually been helpful and refreshing for me to be able to see, interact with my colleagues, have that kind of collegiality across the section. You know, I've worked at larger schools too, and I think there you'd very much be in a world that's really all about housing. You really wouldn't have sort of that global perspective of the entire institution. And so I've been very appreciative of the fact of how we've been able to share information and kind of deftly move from one thing to another without having to, like, you know, coordinate with like 500 other people, which is sort of, not that Purdue isn't doing well. I think that West Lafayette is handling it very well, but it has taken them a very different path down this summer than we've had.
I'll quickly chime in. I would say it's nice to not have to deal with the dynamics of board of managers and board of trustees and the intersection of boards and politics, and how we've seen, particularly in Southern, my perspective being on the West Coast, what I've been seeing of impact of some of the schools and universities in the Southern part of the country, and how just politics have dictated some of the decisions they have made. Particularly even hearing things about faculty, the requirement of in-person instruction. That was really hard to hear. And I was I'm appreciative that I work at an institution where we still have the resources to connect with other schools around us, as well as Akuho'ai to connect with other institutions here. But at the end of the day, we can make decisions based upon science, based upon our students, based upon our community.
I would have to agree with Isaiah and Scott. Over here at Upstate, that is something that we kind of have the luxury of as well. One of the things that I appreciate a lot about being at a smaller institution is that we get to work a little bit more closely with our partners here on campus with health services and just dining services and our colleagues, we're able to kind of have more personal conversations and go case by case a little bit more on the needs of the student. So that's been really helpful for us over here in our department, is that we have a little bit more closer relationships with one another. And so we're able to navigate and brainstorm together and come up with the best options for the students and also for the staff and faculty who are working with the students as well.
I've got nothing to add. I think that was all well said.
One I see as the question and answer section starts to fill up, we do have some advantages, but those advantages only truly work if people are following the CDC guidelines and keeping distanced and wearing masks and those sorts of things. And somebody here mentions that they work in the Res Life office at their university, and really Residence Life is the only department that is addressing mask wearing on campus. And we've been on campus since early August, and mask fatigue is setting in here as well. So can you maybe each talk a little bit about how precautions look on your campus, and who is enforcing that? Obviously, at the end of the day, it's going to be student conduct, but are you getting support from other places on campus, or is it mainly Residence Life and student conduct that are having to address students in these situations?
I would say here at Upstate, we are getting a lot of support across campus. We are implementing it in every building. So we do have mask requirements. If you are going into a building, masks are required. And I think across the board, we're all, especially faculty and staff, we're setting that example for our students. And so that is allowing them to see how important it is to follow the CDC guidelines, to follow our policies here at our institution. And I think across the board, everyone is really doing their best to kind of implement that and to follow the guidelines that have been set before us. So we do see some students on campus who don't abide by those guidelines. And so if there were ever a situation, we kindly remind them about wearing their mask and what those guidelines are saying. But we are being the example, and I think that that really helps the students to see us doing it first.
I'm happy to talk about it too. I agree with everything you said. I think to understand why masks are supported kind of here is we are very few in person. So I think it was 17% of our campus is remote, which is, counts for our kind of lower occupancy. But the amount of times I've seen people has been mainly like when they've been in like our student lounge areas, not in housing, but like in the union. And, they've been eating or drinking, or they've just, they've been trying to talk on their phone, and it's taken them a while to get used to it. We as a committee, the Return to kind of Campus committee, really thought, one of the things we ought to do is really, walk around at the beginning of classes and really talk to people about that and making sure they were covering their noses and all that kind of thing. And we did, but we did it. We talked about doing it, pleasantly and with support. And again, it's that whole cross section of the university. So it sounds like this user is saying that, housing is being the bad guys. And I could see a scenario where that could have happened. I think what happened for us though is we set it up well right away. So I would agree with Brittany that we're seeing a lot of support. We're seeing a lot of people across campus do it. So I wish I had a different opinion. I could give you some strategies.
Aaron, do you want to go?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm the jerk in residence when it comes to enforcing mask policy among students. I think from my limited experience, it's got to be from the top down. And I think there's also things we can do from the bottom up as well. I think it represents a polarity that involves both. So speaking from the top down, we had to sign something called the Spalding Promise, saying that we're going to be in integrity on and off campus as students, faculty, and staff concerning our adherence to the CDC guidelines. And I mean, that's not easy, but I think also doing the right thing isn't easy. And I think that's a message for everybody at the campus. I think from the bottom up, I know it's been a learning experience for me of enforcing it, even though if you're going to get pushback in the process from students. And we've gone that it has to just go after a warning, it goes to the student conduct process. I told myself years ago to care about students, but not care what they think about you. I'm still working on that, but that's been a learning example for me. So it's been top down and bottom up.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on this question. So again, as I said earlier, in LA County, all schools are 100% remote instruction. So we have a lot of strict policies regarding who can even be physically on campus. No buildings are open, so on and so forth. So I think a lot of those rules and policies, I think, prohibit a lot of things. We have somewhat of a limited responsibility as it pertains to our off-campus students. So we have about 400 students who live in the immediate vicinity of our campus. And as many of you all know, we hear stories all over about how students are popping off campus, and kind of what is the responsibility of institutions to address those. And so when I went to legal general counsel, they were like, oh, actually, you do have some responsibility in regards of assisting with helping them keep the peace and such. We can't evict them, but our code of student conduct, which I also oversee, they are still our students. And so I co-lead a committee with our director of campus safety, our director of student leadership and Greek life, our athletic director, to basically periodically review off-campus incidents to ensure that we have a plan and a method of communication as it pertains to how we communicate with off-campus students. Going back to the question about being seen as the police, I had noticed that was something we were experiencing earlier, because there was a lot of, through committee work, there were a lot of things that I was continuously being reminded that, well, your staff is live on, But then I had to spend time being like, well, let's have a conversation about why my staff are live on. And no, it does not mean they're running into every room with no PPE, taking care of students. That's not how live in was defined when these roles were first defined. So I would say one of the things that's been really interesting throughout all of this is I've had to teach individuals what contemporary residential education and student conduct is to individuals that probably really never had to think about it before. I meet regularly with our vice president of communications because he actually does not know, student life, student development. And so I've been actually really appreciative that he's been very receptive to me helping him understand all of that. I spend a lot of time on the conduct aspect, helping individuals understand this idea of finding the balance between student conduct. As we know, best practices is an educational experience, but then what does that mean in a pandemic? And does it mean a one strike rule? All I can say is I think it's really important to keep the lines of communication open with those above us. And to not be afraid to have these conversations, and to not be afraid to appropriately, but sometimes push back to help people, because in an ideal world, we are the experts of our area. And I really believe in leaning on to expertise. And so I say in some circles, I'm never going to go into a faculty's classroom and give a lecture on how they should be teaching organic chemistry, right? So I would hope that the same respect would be there to have individuals give their full opinions about what should and shouldn't be happening. And when that happens, to have, ideally appropriate conversation to mitigate some of that, and ideally to have some common ground so we can all move forward, because we are really all into this together.
Those are all really great points. I think for PC, I think we kind of see both sides of this. During the day, the advantage of being a smaller school is we have faculty and staff that have great relationships with students, and students want to honor those relationships and do a good job of wearing their masks and keeping their distance. When everyone goes home in the evening, that is not always the same case. Even if they're just studying in the campus center, there's definitely a little more laxity when it comes to taking those precautions. And so our staff does have a little extra work in the evenings because of that. But we also do have good support from the president and the leadership team and our faculty. So that is all well and good. And, it's nice to hear so many places are doing well with that. I know there's a lot of places that are still struggling with students and getting them to understand why this is so important and why they need to do it so that they can stay on campus and be in person for classes and those sorts of things. The funny thing is, I think if you had asked me, last year at this time or even into the beginning of spring semester, what were my biggest concerns about the fall semester, wearing a mask was nowhere on that list yet. I think probably the first thing most of us would have said is there's an election coming up in November, and there's going to be a lot of work that we need to do around that. And so while I don't want to ignore COVID, and I'm sure it might come into our conversation anyways, can you all talk a little bit about, conversations you're having on your campus about supporting students through the election process? We've got voter registration drives and those sorts of things now, but even as the outcome of the election, comes to social media and the media world, how do we support those students through processing who wins and who does not and what that looks like for our future? What's going on your campuses?
Yeah, I'll go. So, I mean, we've done the voter registration drives. We're doing the education with students. Early voting in Indiana started here today. We don't have mail-in ballots in Indiana, really at all, except for regular absentee ballots. So talking to our students, because we're a state school, so we have a lot of Indiana residents, about voting and what it needs to vote, during this time. I think that one of the things I think we're most concerned about, we've been talking about at the staff level, we're still trying to figure out how to address it programmatically, to be honest with you, is this idea of how divided our country is, and what that's gonna look like no matter who wins, and so trying to predict that is very difficult. I think the last election caught a lot of people off guard as far as the results, and I think we weren't necessarily prepared for the flood of emotions and reaction that kind of came from both sides of that. And I think I think for us here, the good news is we aren't all on campus, and so in a way, we don't have the same kind of, probably campus reaction that we would have before, but trying to figure out how to reach all these students now that we have them in the residence halls and what they may look like, that's something I think I'm concerned about, enough that when you can kind of pair that with sort of the all the racial strife that's been happening in our country this summer, I think could lead to some very potential, if I'll just say if Trump wins, I think you might have some students on one side who will say, hey, we feel disenfranchised, we feel like nobody's listening to us. And I think if Biden wins, I think you're going to have a whole other side of students who are saying, my candidate did win. It's a concern, and we live in a part of Indiana that's very divided, with Democrats and Republicans, and so I think that we're going to see some of the kind of intimidation here as our race is tightening up here. Our gubernatorial election used to not be competitive, and now all of a sudden it's competitive. And so I think there's a lot of tension going on in our state, and I think we're worried about how it might erupt. So we're looking at different ways to address that, and what those reactions may be in the halls for both scenarios, of how different people will react and how we can support people.
I was in a meeting last week and somebody brought up the election, and I put my hands in my face because I think that I haven't thought about it for a few days because of work with COVID, and then over the aftermath of Kentucky's Attorney General's Breonna Taylor report to the grand jury decision. It's like, oh, there's an election going on, of course. And that's not saying we're not simply engaged. I think for us, I know in Louisville, and particularly talking bi-weekly with other senior housing officers within the Commonwealth of Kentucky, I think and there's some talk for the election. And I think right now the issues with COVID are taking time, and also we've pivoted our programming or community learning for our RAs just about to focus on mental health right now with COVID, or with our theme is racial justice and reconciliation, and we're drafting and implementing learning outcomes for that. And outside of voter registration drive, and at my university, there's not much we've done because of where we are. But I think there's also time for us to do that. So I'm curious if others have had that similar experience where it's been there, we're working on it. We also know that there's issues that are of competing priority right here in front of us, because that's been my experience.
Yeah, Aaron, I would agree. Same here. It's definitely on our minds, but that hasn't been the front of our focus currently. I do know that a lot of our student leaders on campus are kind of at the forefront of the election process and voting and things like that. Over here in housing, a lot of our attention, like Aaron mentioned, has been on COVID issues and things like that. And our programming as well has been around COVID-19, also, just mental health and getting our students and our residents, making sure that they're in a good place. So I would agree with Aaron, that hasn't been super on the forefront, but that is something that we need to consider and think of.
Yeah, Occidental, or Oxy, it's a pretty engaged community, and I think also just the energy of just the political nature of Los Angeles in general, I think attracts a particular type of student. And so I think we spend a lot of our time thinking about, because the majority of our students are not on campus, how does communication look to students to make sure that they're registered to vote? And knowing that every state has their own process, and we have a high number of students who are maybe studying at home, how do they make sure that they're just as engaged and get the information that's relevant to them? We've also began, having conversations again with, senior leadership. And, one of the things I think I said in a meeting is we should just assume, like the campus should just assume that there's going to be protests, regardless of doesn't matter the outcome, there are going to be protests. And I think our campus just needs to assume and prepare for that. Particularly with a lot of Black Lives Matters movements, we've experienced multiple protests all throughout Los Angeles. And so we have a lot of data to support what we think is probably going to happen. So again, all I'll say is that I don't think it is I think we should also be careful that this shouldn't be, again, the residence life issue that only residence life deals with. It's an institutional issue. And I think that whatever positionality we can use to have those conversations again with senior administration, so they can help to understand that there needs to be a comprehensive approach to how we do it, is really, really important.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to the elections, I think a good, healthy reminder to everyone that local and state elections are as important as federal elections. Who you put in your local courts and in your local, community councils and such can play out in important ways for every person. So glad to hear that everybody's making sure students are being engaged and being out there and voting. I think Aaron and Isaiah, you both brought up a bit more clearly some of what we have seen, from last spring and into this summer. I'm sure many of you have read the statements that ACUHO-I has put out after the senseless and needless deaths that have occurred from so many of our Black citizens. And so, just some questions about what changes you might be seeing on your campus as a result of the different protests and counter protests, marches and other information drives that have been occurring all across the country. What changes has your campus had to make or thought about making for fall semester or maybe even into spring semester?
Well, we, through our Black students on campus, we have a Black Action Plan committee that is supported by our president, as well as our Vice President of Student Affairs, and is kind of being the committee as faculty, staff, student representation, and it's being coordinated through our Intercultural Community Center. And I think that there's a lot of power and mobility and movement within that committee to really reflect on, even within the confines of whatever's happening in the world, it does not mitigate or take away from the fact that our students, even before all of this happening, might have had very negative experiences on our campus. And particularly, I think many students of our students everywhere are probably aware of kind of what I would call like faux wokeness, like, you know, and I'll use an example at our institution when all the BLM movements were going on. A lot of academic departments wrote these beautifully crafted, probably too crafted letters of statement and support for Black students. But then all that raised was more animus of like, do you really mean what you're saying? Because all of your actions of the way in which students have felt treated by different offices, administrators and such have been very negative. So I don't believe the words that you're saying. You're probably putting this out there because you feel you need to say something. And so what I will say is I think all of our students are expecting action and not words. From a residence life perspective, all we can do, you know, is offer our support. My associate director sits on the Black Action Plan Committee, and for us to, you know, contribute everything we can, knowing, you know, I can't tell a tenured professor what to do or how to run their class, but we can certainly, for example, have conversations about Black themed housing. And so that's kind of one of the, I'm trying to really be, you know, look at what are the things that we can do in our confines, and how we can continue to support students, because like I can't go tell a professor something, but if the students feel a certain way, I can maybe help them figure out how to communicate their message to faculty, because their message will be very differently received than my message. So that's kind of how I think about this issue.
Yeah, I don't quite know how to respond here because Purdue has seen of course my phone rings right when I start talking, but Purdue as a system has to really work together so that one doesn't kind of get out in front of the other. And so this is where it does become a little unwieldy as you're looking at responding. So a lot of our response came from our president at West Lafayette, and you know, putting out kind of an initial statement of support and whatnot. Housing did some things specifically. I mean, it was this summer, and so we didn't have a lot of residents, but we thought it important to address it. So we reached out to all of our alumni, housing alumni, and sent an email and put up some information about some of their thoughts on all this. But as an institution, I think it is hard because I think that there was a lot of talk going on in the faculty discussion board, but I think there was sort of this, it's over here and we're dealing with COVID. So kind of prioritization. And that to me is the hard part about this. Is not that I think it got lost in particular, but I think it was, they had to make a priority as far as where their emphasis was going to be in decision making this summer. And so I think there were statements of support. I think there were some protests on campus. I think there's talk now of putting in we don't have a cultural center, so I think there was some talk of setting aside space for that. So I definitely think that there's some want to change and some want to understand this more. But I think we're an institution that's still trying to figure out what it is that we need to do to support this. So, and then being part of the Purdue system, I think we're trying to be mindful of that and mindful that, Fort Wayne, West Lafayette, and Northwest really all, as a system need to, as much as possible, be on the same page.
I will just kind of piggyback off of what Isaiah mentioned earlier. Over here at USC Upstate, and even at my previous institution, because I'm fairly new here. But one of the things that I did notice is that students want to feel like they're getting genuine responses from administration, and they want to feel that they really genuinely care, and they're actively seeking to be involved in such issues as these. And so the emails are great. That's a lot what we've seen. The emails are great. But beyond that, what is our administration doing to ensure that students really feel what they're saying in those emails? And so there has been some concerns with students who have, I don't want to say an issue, but they do question the genuineness of those type of statements and emails. Are they just putting it out because they have to put it out, or they need to do it to save face, or are they genuinely concerned about their students of color and the issues that they're dealing with and that they have to go through? So I think on our end, that is something as an institution, even in our department, that we are trying to kind of push the being more genuine about those things versus just putting it out there to say we did it. Because believe it or not, our students, they pick up on things like that, and they know if we really care about their needs and about their culture and what they're going through, and when we're just putting it out there. And to Isaiah's point, he mentioned a little bit earlier, why now are statements like this just coming out when these issues have been present for so long? So a lot of our students, are battling that aspect of it. But I think it's our responsibility to keep reassuring them that we're doing all that we can on our end to support them, to help them, and do all we can for them as well. And also our colleagues and faculty and staff as well.
Aaron, any other thoughts to add?
I think that if for those who haven't done it, I think it's a good time to acknowledge that and confess that and say, hey, this is how I can do right moving forward. I also know as a white male that can be maybe surface level saying that. So I want to be aware of also your audience and how you identify and where you communicate that. I think it's also if you've been doing the work, keep doing the work. My university, I think we've done the work for a while, and I think we've just continued it. So I think if you're late to the game, I think it's good to acknowledge that rather than avoid it, but talk about, hey, this is how I've learned from it, and this is what we're going to do to make it right. So just a thought.
But even if you're late to the game, still glad to have you here. So, and along with that, just so you all know, ACUHO-I does have an anti-racism task force that is doing some of this work on behalf of the profession, and we'll look forward to seeing the results of their conversations and research here in a few weeks and later on into the spring. I'll be honest, I don't know how to transition well out of such a tough conversation other than to just transition in a completely different route. And so we've had a couple of questions about, and I think it is timely for all of us to be thinking about spring semester, even though it is only October. And so just, as we start to get towards the end of our time, anything that each of you could share about plans for spring semester. Isaiah, I know you've talked a little bit about having to wait on the city, but, plans for spring semester, both in terms of housing and in terms of recruitment. What do you anticipate for your institutions?
I think for us, a lot of this is just, it's hard to know, like a lot, I'd love to sit here and say, I know exactly what's going to happen this spring. I think that there's conversations on the academic side now. I think I said we were like 17% in person. I think there's some thoughts of expanding class size, putting more on campus, which would of course would benefit housing. I think we're seeing that as a number one reason why people aren't here. along with just not wanting to get infected with COVID as sort of the two reasons for people to not be here. And so, of course, that will benefit our occupancy. And I think the more we've learned about COVID, the more comfortable we are in managing it and going through it. But all of it's, you know, predicated on what happens in these next few months with the spread and flu season and everything. And so I think that, you know, we're not in the same place, as I say, with government regulations and holding off. So we're able to kind of move forward with some planning. But on the other hand, we're also waiting for numbers and stats and information so that we know that if we start bringing people back, it's a wise thing to do. Our faculty have been out front the whole time saying we should be mostly remote, we should be mostly remote, we should be mostly remote. And they're the ones now beginning to say, well, maybe we can expand our class size and doing something. So that gives me hope that that will happen. But it's really the rest of the state and country that really needs to, you know, step up so that we can begin to, you know, get all this stuff under control. So we're waiting too. But I think that we're working with athletics to try and get our athletes back on the field and doing some of those things. So that will help our school in a lot of different ways too. So there's a lot of new information coming out about that for Division II athletics. So we're supporting that. You know, we're going through you know, flu shots, making sure everybody gets flu shots now. It helps them through the flu season. And I think that's been a really important drive for us as well to get the spring semester started. We are not changing our academic calendar, like a lot of people. So I'll leave it to my colleagues. If any of them are changing their academic calendar, that would probably be a good thing I'd like to know about.
For us, we're planning to continue as we are right now. It's single occupancy housing, so nobody has a roommate for our apartment style buildings, and that suite style living. Each person still has an individual bedroom, yet we are just housing one fewer student within that area to give some space. Our calendar's not changing. Our RAs are still having to live in non-assigned RA rooms, and I know they haven't been too happy about that, but that's where life is right now. And our calendar's not changing. We also enveloped this within a philosophy to adapt, innovate, and overcome. So last summer we did a three option pivot and prepare strategy. So whether it's for this fall or for the spring, we had three options where we could best case scenario, worst case scenario, or anywhere in between look toward adjusting what on-campus housing looks like. So that's been, I think, good for us, is having three scenarios planned. And even in between that, you can still we've been able to figure out what's the best way to help our students learn and prevent a spread of the virus on campus. So I think having that adapt, innovate, overcome philosophy, where it's, hey, I'm going to have three options available, has been a good frame of reference to help us think through it. It's like, I think it was Eisenhower Patton said, plans are useless, but planning is needed. It's like a lot of our plans have been useless, but the planning we have done has helped us think through to make an informed decision. And we'll continue that this spring.
Yeah, I'll only add to what I shared earlier. Due to the low number here that we have on campus, about half of my department is furloughed through November 15th. And part of them returning back was the assumption that we would be having more students on campus, which very much makes sense. The conversations that I've been a part of thus far are all about increasing numbers. But, as I've said earlier, we're not going to know what the county tells us until way after, potentially weeks after November 15th. So something I'm working on is trying to get a guarantee of, if these are all the things that everybody around me wants and thinks is important, and we need to be planning for more students, then the institution is going to need to make a calculated risk of ideally, I want to bring my team back so we can prepare for whatever it is. And hopefully we won't have to bite the bullet budgetarily, but so I'm spending a lot of my time advocating and lobbying for bringing my team back, is how I'm spending my time, which also includes RAs. We don't have RAs currently on campus, but I'm lobbying for that as well.
Over here, we are a little bit in the waiting game in regards to spring as well. Currently, we are still following our same academic calendar. However, we are not 100% sure how next semester is going to look. There have been talks that faculty will kind of remain, a lot of our classes will remain online. So that may look a little bit different for our students who are currently living with us, because I know a lot of parents, I think a lot about the parent concerns that they have about letting their students come back in the spring semester and wanting them to potentially stay home if the majority of their classes are going to be online. So that's something that we're thinking through as well, about our retention. How many students are we actually going to get back here in the spring and what that looks like. So we're having those conversations currently at our institution.
And as we come right up to the edge of our time, I just wanted to give each of you, 30 seconds. Any final thoughts you want to share with our attendees today?
Hang in there.
Yeah.
This shit sucks. And it's really tough. And none of this, all of this is so new and unpredictable. And that's really real. And so continuing to, I think, to find ways for you all to take care of yourselves as well as taking care of your team is really the best advice I can give.
Yeah, I would agree with Isaiah. Just make sure you continue to take the time for yourself and to self-care and to make sure that you are good mentally and that you're healthy as well, because a lot of times it can be easy to forget that with everything going on. But take care of yourself, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, and I echo that. Definitely take care of yourself, because that's really important. I have a YouTube channel where I dance. I'm not going to give you any more information than that, but you can find it if you look hard enough. But but what I'll tell you is this, and I've said this before to others. There's no best practices. There's just practices. There's nothing for us to fall back and rely on except for common sense and instincts. And we have to rely on that. We've all been trained to do certain things, and now we're just all putting it together in some of the toughest times our country and world has ever faced. So remember that too. Like, you're going to try things, some of it will work and some of it won't, and it's okay.
I'll encourage you all to ask the question, what does this make possible? I think that circumstances with COVID or racial injustice has provided barriers to just success in many ways. Yeah, I think it can also be a leverage toward the change to which we aspire. And I'm not saying I have the answer to that or I do it well. I have known some small wins, particularly with housing assignments or move-in day, or what the first week of school looks like, by asking the question, what does this make possible? And I think that's been a good question to help us flip the barrier into a question and help us see the opportunity behind it.
And for me, a quote I've been thinking of lately, it's a quote by Anne Frank that says, "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world." And I think about all of the different ways that can apply. Certainly here this afternoon, it applies to our panelists taking the time to share their experience and their good wisdom with us. For each of our attendees who are listening and thinking of how to translate this to their campus and asking good questions. And finally, to James and our entire ACU Home Office staff for organizing all of this for us. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. James, do you have any closing notes for us?
Just want to take a second to, again, echo what you said, Drew, and thank you to everybody for being a part of our panel and for being our attendees. Again, if there's a topic that you would like to hear more about, please reach out to the home office and we can see if it makes sense and find the appropriate people to bring together for a panel. Also, whether it's talking stick stories, sessions at different events and so forth, this is a great opportunity for us to hear from our members about what is happening in their world, what is the information that you need to be able to improve the services that you provide students, to improve your own experiences as professionals. And that's what we're here to do, to help you out in that regard. So if there is nothing left from the panel or Drew, I would will bring this to a close. Again, please note that if you're interested in learning a little bit more about housing and student safety with the return to campus, we'll be having that roundtable on Thursday, and of course, our October conference series. Please read about that on our website and learn more and take advantage of those team registrations. And with that, I will wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.